On this coming Wednesday, I'll be starting my long-awaited vacation time by going to Whistler. And before I play any golf or go on hikes, I'm going to start out with an 8-day silent retreat. And originally I'd planned to share some motivational stories about the power that opening up the Bible has had in my own life, especially during these 8-day silent retreats in the past. I've gone on 3 of them. But I've realized that motivational stories, although they're good, usually only inspire us for short periods of time. And maybe over the past 4 weeks, as Father Hamilton and I have shared motivational stories about the power that opening up the Bible has had in the life of St. Augustine or even Stephen Colbert. Maybe you've tried out some of these challenges like Father Larry Richards, no Bible, no breakfast, no Bible, no bed. But the motivation doesn't last too long. It's so true for all of us. Far too often with just the busyness of work and family life, we can forget and then we lose our motivation and we don't take on these new habits that we desire to do in our lives. Whether it's just the classic New Year's Day resolution that we want to eat healthier food or exercise more often, or just a challenge like this to do no Bible, no breakfast, no Bible, no bed. Changing our behaviors and taking on new habits is just really hard. But there's great news today, because in today's readings, God is giving us a new approach to take on new habits, a new approach to change our behaviors. And the way that God's revealing it to us is by changing our environment. Changing our environment. Rather than relying upon willpower or motivation or even like talent to take on a new habit, to do a behavior that we want, God's revealing to us that our environment, the places in which we behave and act, has the biggest influence on how we behave and act. So we can change our environments to go from a bad environment to a good environment in a simple way, just by changing, we call them cues. So you remove these negative cues from your life and you put in positive cues. We know this to be true. For example, if you want to eat healthier, the best way is just to remove the negative cues of junk food. If you constantly see a delicious plate of cookies on the counter, you can only rely upon your motivation or willpower for so long until you're going to eat that whole plate of cookies. So either you want to just remove the negative cues from your house, or at least put them in a place that you can't see, because every time you see it, you'll remind yourself that you want to eat those cookies. And then put in positive cues. If you want to start eating healthier food, you buy healthy food, you place it in a place on the counter that you can see. And eventually this changes your behavior, and you'll start to develop these good habits of eating healthier food. It's the same thing with exercise. If we want to exercise more and watch less TV, we've got to remove those negative cues. We've got to put the TV away, or at least put the remote control away. And then we need to put in positive cues. Like if our exercise equipment and clothes are in a place that we can see, every time we see it, we'll remind ourselves, oh yeah, I want to start working out more. I want to exercise more. And then that'll be a positive cue in your life to actually take on that new behavior, the new habit, and eventually it'll become something that you do frequently. So we know this to be true on a physical level, on eating habits and exercise habits. Same thing is true on a spiritual level. When we look at today's readings, we see Elijah in this first reading. Elijah was living in a very bad environment. He had been battling all these pagan prophets. He just went through this epic defeat of all these 450 pagan prophets on Mount Carmel. And then the evil queen Jezebel put a death warrant on Elijah. This was a very negative cue in Elijah's life, and it was having a huge impact on him. He was God's greatest prophet, performing all these miracles, and finally this bad environment took a toll on him, and he wanted to give up. Elijah was in fear, but thankfully what he did was he removed that negative cue from his life. He got rid of the bad environment, and as we heard in the first reading, what did he do? He fled to Mount HOREB, which was known as the mountain of God. It's a very positive cue. It's a very positive environment. So Elijah makes this change from a bad environment to a good environment, and that's a good environment for prayer. And in that good environment, he was able to have an encounter with God. He was able to enter into prayer, enter into a place of silence, and that encounter with God changed his life forever. Same thing is true in today's gospel. Jesus was going through a very, very busy, hectic time in his ministry. He had tried to actually go to the desert to be alone to pray after the death of John the Baptist. But thousands of people came to him in the desert, begging him for food, wanting to see miracles. And so he answered that need, but then what does he do? He sends the apostles away in a boat, and he removes the crowd. He dismisses the crowd. So Jesus removed these two negative cues in his life for his time of prayer. He knew that he needed to pray. So he dismissed the crowds, sent the apostles away in a boat, and then what does it say in the Gospels? He goes to a mountain alone by himself to pray. This was his positive cue. This was the place that Jesus would often go to pray. And in that time of prayer, he received the strength that he needed to continue on his mission. So inspired by the example of Elijah and Jesus, when we want to take on these new behaviors, these new habits in our life, we need to look at removing negative cues and putting in positive cues. If we want to open up our Bibles more often, to take on Father Larry Richard's challenge, no Bible, no breakfast, no Bible, no bed, we have to remove the negative cues, whatever those might be in our lives. If it's watching TV late at night instead of reading the Bible, we can just put the remote away or put the TV in another room. And then if we want the positive cue, we've got to take our Bibles out, put them on our bed. That's a very positive cue that we can see. And the more positive cues, the better. I often like to go to an adoration chapel, and that's just I put my iPhone on silence, or I put it on airplane mode. So I remove the negative cues of the distraction that a phone can have, and then I place myself in the Lord's presence, a very positive cue, and that just helps me to pray. I put myself in that good environment, and that's what's essential about the spiritual life. We need to put ourselves in these good environments. That's what Elijah did in today's first reading. He went to Mount Horeb. He put himself in a good environment, and he allowed God to enter in, because that's what God does. God enters into our lives when we give him the opportunity to. That's what Jesus did. Jesus is our role model. And Jesus goes to a mountain alone by himself to pray. So he's showing us today that we too should have these mountains, these places that we go to pray. And something that I've experienced over the last 4 weeks, trying to preach about this no Bible, no breakfast, no Bible, no bed, just the power of opening up the Bible, is that the simple act of opening up our Bible immediately creates a good environment. You could just picture yourself sitting alone in your room by yourself, and just the simple act of opening up your Bible, placing it on your lap. It's like it immediately creates a good environment. And you'll only be able to say the same thing that I'm saying if you just try it out. So much of the spiritual life, you just need to try it out. Give yourself the opportunity to see what it's like. Give God an opportunity to enter into your life. You have nothing to lose in this, absolutely nothing to lose, and everything to gain by just trying it out. And just to conclude, in today's gospel, Jesus gives us another lesson. He was at a very busy time in his ministry, but he gave himself permission to go pray. He gave himself permission to go pray, to spend time in that good environment with God alone to pray. We need to give ourselves permission as well to go pray. A lot of us have very busy schedules, a lot of things that we have to do every single day. Jesus shows us today that he too had a busy schedule, but he gave himself permission to pray. We need to do that. We need to give ourselves permission to go off to be alone, to open up our Bibles, to give God an opportunity to enter into our lives. Because every time we do, every time we open up our Bibles, every time we go off to be alone with God in prayer, He will always give us the grace that we need to move on, to help those most in need. This is what happens in today's gospel with Jesus. After He spends that time in prayer on a mountain, what does He do? He goes and walks on water, and He's able to help the apostles in their need. And the same thing will be true for us. We might not be able to walk on water after our times of prayer, but God will always give you the grace that you need to help those most in need. So give yourself permission to just open up the Bible more often. Give yourself permission to spend those times in prayer. Give God an opportunity to enter into your life. Try it out. You have nothing to lose, and you have everything to gain.